Data does a couple of things. It allows you to know when you're on the right track and in the right direction. It allows you to know when perhaps you're regressing. But also, it gives transparency to all of the stakeholders and all of the team. And I think when team performance is of the utmost, it's essential that everyone who is in that team pulls their own weight to be able to see your individual impact relative to the rest of the team. It can at times be rewarding for that person to see, yes, I'm keeping up there, I'm actively contributing, but also perhaps for the team member who isn't contributing to the same level, they see it too. And for a sense of shared duty and not to be embarrassed, they actually pick up their performance as well because it's visible to everyone. Call out team mates' performances and team members' performances and give them recognition. Everyone wants to know they are having a valuable input into the result. And I think being recognized in front of their peers is one of the most important things for people, I think, that they can validate that they're doing a good job. Tim, I know we've talked about this before. You're interested in the intersection of competitive sport and then driving higher performance within teams within BioPharma. And we talked about this one example which really stood out to me. It was the boat race between Oxford and Cambridge. Oxford have been winning for a number of years. The boat race is held on the River Thames. It's 3.25 miles. They have some of the best rowers in the world, Olympic champions, world champions. And when the Berlin Wall came down, there were some coaches from the Eastern Bloc countries in East Germany who now had access to the Western experience. And this coach came over and he took a very different approach to training in the boat. And he put sensors on the slides for speed, and he put pressure sensors on the oars, and videoed everyone and measured everyone's stroke, and it was all perfectly in alignment. And this crew, who on paper certainly were not as strong, the Glaxo Group had most of the world champions and the Olympic champions, absolutely thrashed them, because through measurement they were able to put the teammates in the optimal configuration and ensure that they were doing all the same thing at the same time, which kept the run on the boat, and they handily won for a number of years afterwards.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Mikhailishvili. I'm the host of the All Out Coach podcast, and I have a guest for you today who inspires me every time I speak to him. He's an accomplished scientist, an athlete turned business leader, and he's going to talk to us about breaking through the tight turns of the business of science today. His name is Graham Long, founder of BioCresco, with an established track record of scaling companies and visibility and line of sight from all aspects of drug development, from R&D, manufacturing to sales, marketing as well. And so tune in, ask questions, connect with him after the podcast as well. Graham, so nice to see you here on All Out Coach Show.
Tim, thank you so much for having me on the show. Now, I'm looking forward to enjoying an engaging conversation about this topic, because I never anticipated I would ever be in the commercial side. I thought I'd always be in the R&D side, but I've got to say, having moved to the commercial side, I just met some wonderful, truly wonderful people, and it's such a different challenge to be able to use one's science and also business skills to make an impact.
Yeah. You know, on this show, we try to capture memorable conversations that matter. And I can tell you that all of our conversations have truly been unforgettable, ones that I've learned a lot from. And also, so you are a very important guest on this particular show, where we inspire our audience to transcend their differences with others and extend their boundaries of their roles and responsibilities, right? Where the motto is stretch yourself and lift others, as you have done throughout your career. And so our audience will learn a lot about the journey that you have taken. And so I want to ask you, how would you describe the different stages in your career journey and the lessons that they taught you as a person and a leader?
So I think there's very few natural born leaders. We're all learning about ourselves as we grow and develop it through our careers. I'd always been interested in science. I call myself fairly analytical. I love delving into deep, complex problems to come up with solutions that can have an impact. So I think as I've evolved through academic research and then entered the discovery tools space, so CapEx, instrumentation, services, and reagents that supply biopharma, diagnostics companies, and life science companies. The various roles I've had have all taught me something about human behavior, myself, others, that certainly earlier in my career as a scientist, I hadn't paid as much attention to. But I think people are people. They team and work well together when there is that mutual respect, trust, and there is clear direction as to what one is trying to accomplish. So those are the rules I've learned, is to EQ, soft skills, are enormously important in growing and maintaining a team that is inspired to work together and go the extra step, because they all have each other's back.
Yeah. Graham, for our audience that may not be familiar with some of the details of your work, can you describe some of your early research, which included cancer research and a lot of very well-known global companies, right, as well?
I initially had worked in BioPharma in the Alpharoma Group in Glaxo in London prior to stepping into going on a PhD at Addenbrooke's Hospital, Cambridge, UK, in clinical biochemistry. The intention was always to, following the doctorate, is go back into industry as drug development. I went to do a couple of postdocs, primarily in cancer research, transcriptional factor control of oncogenes, retinoblastoma, E2F, and P53. I was absolutely enjoying the work and the research, and through a mutual friend of ours, I got introduced to a company called Packard Bioscience. It was an interesting segue into the business world, one that I hadn't expected, but I found immensely challenging and rewarding, because the work I was doing, transferring workflows, assays, technologies to biopharma labs, all up and down the development pipeline, it actually was actionable and translatable almost immediately compared to academic science, which is one is asking what can be. You're able to interrogate all these different possibilities in academic science, whereas when you transition into industry, there's definitely a focus on getting the next step to develop that drug and get it to market faster. So the goals are more clearly defined. And I think the urgency is there. So you become much more focused. And I think that's the major difference between academia and industry. And having worked in small, medium, and large companies that provide solutions to biopharma, from early discovery, screening, preclinical and clinical, I've seen, been exposed to an awful lot of the different challenges and scenarios one encounters within the biopharmaceutical process.
Yeah. So from your personal internal perspective of fulfillment, okay, or your biggest accomplishment, if you were to think about it, what was that one turning point in your career where you felt like you had reached that kind of, sense of accomplishment and fulfillment?
I think it's really about building a team that actually functioned together because they wanted to, not because they had to. I stepped into a role in a spin out from Harvard about 12, 13 years ago. And a disparate group of people who were attempting to launch a new technology in the market that no one had heard about. And to see the team gel together, provide them the environment and the ability to communicate and interact where they're all pulling in the same direction. When I got there, I think the communications weren't as optimal as one would hope in terms of listening to each other, explaining their ideas and objectives and some of the challenges they had. And the biggest take home I had from that was everyone needs to stop and listen to each other and then try to understand what the other stakeholders are saying.
Yeah.
There are conscious and unconscious biases in all of us. And when you say something that you feel is fairly straightforward and clear, it actually, that other person may have heard it differently. So stopping and taking a moment to confirm that the person you're talking to actually understood what you meant and the context. And this has been probably my biggest eye-opener in terms of getting teams to work together. We all communicate differently.
Yeah.
And my style impacts others, and their style impacts me and the other teammates.
I would define you as a person who's committed and dedicated to innovation and driving and accelerating innovation, right? As a scientist, and based on what you have achieved. But the problem that I've seen, that I've observed in the industry, particularly in an organized corporate structure, is that the road to pure, true innovation that scientists have and aspire to is quite a tough one, right? And so how is that changing today? How have you continued to be an innovator throughout your career?
So having worked in very large companies, one, when you get to several hundred or a few thousand people, you need some processes in place. Otherwise, the company cannot function.
Yeah.
There is a very fine line between having that essential process to allow communications between the critical interactive functions, and then having too much process that every innovation just completely grinds to a halt.
Yeah.
So startups and smaller companies, they have smaller management structural teams. So communication across the functions and up and down in the vertical are so much easier. I think larger companies have tried to address this, like the Danaher model, where they create teams, cross-functional teams that work together more on a flat management style basis. You have a team leader, but everyone's input is essential. And many studies have shown that, performance of high-performing teams that deliver time and time again is when each of those team members within that group have complementary skills, but they're also given a voice, and they have psychological safety to put forth their ideas and feel that they will be listened to and heard. And I think that's key and important. Many people don't contribute within a team. Maybe they're shy, or they feel they won't be listened to or heard. But I think having that environment where people feel safe and won't be ridiculed to put forth their ideas because we're certainly smarter together than we are alone. No one person can possibly know everything from a type of business, a market segment, or a workflow. And I think humans' superpower really is in teaming, working together, and using technology. The teaming
you mentioned
allows you to get those next breakthroughs in innovative ideas and solutions that are truly groundbreaking, that will have an impact, a real world impact on people's lives.
You mentioned being a learner, learning even about yourself, but your teams. It sounds like, based on your comments, providing that learning environment, a safe environment, and also recognition for the voice and ability and the flexibility to fail as well, to iterate these ideas, are some of the ingredients. Anything else I'm missing, or any steps you have for our audience to to implementing innovative ideas in small or large companies today, especially?
I think whether you are a manager, an executive, or an individual contributor, it's important to understand where your strengths are and where your blind spots are, and just be honest with oneself, because we're all, I believe, lifelong learners. We're constantly learning all the time. And being open to that, to learn something about yourself, but also others that perhaps you hadn't really seen before. I think that gives us opportunities to have conversations with people who we might not have otherwise, or to ask questions in ways that really truly inspire people. So I think curiosity and a desire for learning are key attributes in anyone, whether you're manager, middle manager, or individual contributor.
Are there particular mentors that you observed that manifested these behaviors that inspired you, that you want to recognize as well?
Oh, yes. I've had some terrific managers, both in academia and in industry, who've been truly great role models in terms of how they approach problems, both technical and then also on the human side, how they lead with empathy, humility, and have the ability to admit when they're wrong. And I think that can engender trust in the employee as well. So they want to know that their managers are genuine, have their interests at heart, are open to listening to ideas without dismissing them offhand, lead from the heart with compassion and with empathy and humility.
Yeah. And so bringing some of these innovative products then to patients, right? How do you identify those small windows of opportunities and those low margins of errors that we have now in our healthcare ecosystem, with new pressures for accountability, right? How were you able to do that at SmartLabs, for example, to scale that company? And those details that matter, that in terms of fine-tuning them, right, and to obtain those results that are desired or even exceed them, right? So how were you able to identify the opportunities at the right time?
I think whatever type of business interaction you have, might be M&A, company acquisition, it might be a strategic partnership, or it might be selling a service and or a product. A lot of it comes down to timing. So the client and the vendor, both parties have to be able to interact at the time when there is a need. At SmartLabs, there was a big need for infrastructure. SmartLabs designed, built, and operated research laboratories, animal research laboratories, and manufacturing rooms. And it's really about asking the client what their needs are fully focused on the research needs within a particular environment. Identifying what the end users are doing, why they potentially need your product, what they find of value is critical to understanding, are you positioning the product correctly? Does it have the right specifications that the client needs? Are you doing an adequate job of explaining what the product or service, the benefits that it has to those end users? And can you actually reach those end users as well? So I think having processes that can identify recurring patterns, both in the types of client you have and what needs they have, allows you to then more specifically target in-kind customers with those needs. And you understand what their needs are, you understand the behaviors and the timelines and the pressures they have. And I think that's important in being able to describe the solutions you have, because if the client understands that you have an understanding of their problems and their challenges, much more likely to engender trust and a two-way collaborative conversation on solving their needs for them.
Yeah, one thing I learned from our previous discussions also is about just the details that are necessary even in the processes, in optimizing a process in manufacturing, and the implications that has in terms of even measuring or the study of metrics, right? Metrology. How did that kind of impact your approach to leading teams after having exposure to manufacturing function, in healthcare?
So in the world of GXP, GLP, and GMP, there's a lot of auditory oversight, as you know. And I think SOPs have to be executed very accurately. There is no room for error, especially in manufacturing. Many of these steps in manufacturing involve measurement along the way, contamination, potency, concentration. And as in any workflow, there are some steps that potentially have the potential to go wrong more than others. And it's identifying those, say, let's call them accident black spots. So if you're on a trip from A to B and there's a tight bend in the road, and that's where most of the accidents happen. And that's true of any workflow too. So having worked in companies that have been deeply involved in the regulatory environment where you cannot make a mistake, and if there is a mistake, you have to go back and do a root cause analysis and then take actions to prevent those from happening again. You can't identify those hotspots areas unless you are intimately familiar with each step and you log and track where the errors occur. Everyone should have in manufacturing a constant process improvement mindset. Now, the SOP is fixed in manufacturing, of course, but looking to see where errors may creep in. If you're seeing drift in the results over a period of several weeks, even though there isn't an overt failure, then you can take preemptive action to identify why that noise is increasing in the system, and potentially had a new teammate come on, or one of the pieces of equipment wasn't calibrated correctly, or there was a misinterpretation in the protocol, or one of the operators has only run it 4 or 5 times. And I think as complex as some of these workflows can be, no one person can hold every step in their head, especially if they don't do it on a really frequent basis. So it's important to have training that's ongoing, that is cementing knowledge of the process, so you can minimize the potential for errors. But then also have checks and balances in those processes that allow you to identify if there are potential for failures in the future. So you have leading indicators, you have lagging indicators.
Sure. Yep.
The only way you can really understand is if you measure those key parameters.
Yeah. Well, I have certainly a big appreciation of this, as you know, Graham, as a PharmD, somebody who was intrigued by 60 Minutes broadcasts on TV on Sunday nights that I had seen, and to this day have clear, vivid memories of watching the unsanitary conditions in which many drugs were manufactured. Unfortunately, in this one, case study of these young individuals who didn't think ahead, as it occurred to me even then that, look, those same treatments may be used by their own mothers or their grandmothers in the future, right? And those kinds of observations or of drugs that were recalled after they came onto the market were one of the biggest drivers for why I started to work in this industry. And I think your comments made me think of also John McNeil, the former president of global sales and marketing at Tesla, whose lecture I recently attended at the World Business Forum in New York, and he talked about innovation by subtraction. The fact that one of his best friends, an NFL coach, shared with him how his team analyzed videotapes of their games, and saw that it was once they really drilled down on the mistakes that they made and made corrective actions to reduce them, that was what really caused them to win more.
Jim, I know we've talked about this before. You're interested in the intersection of competitive sport,
yes,
and then driving higher performance within teams within BioPharma. And we talked about this one example which really stood out to me. It was the boat race between Oxford and Cambridge. And Oxford have been winning for a number of years. The boat race is held on the River Thames. It's 3.25 miles. They have some of the best rowers in the world, Olympic champions, world champions. And when the Berlin Wall came down, there were some coaches from the Eastern Bloc countries in East Germany who now had access to the Western experience. And this coach came over and he took a very different approach to training in the boat. And he put sensors on the slides for speed, and he put pressure sensors on the oars, and videoed everyone and measured everyone's stroke, that it was all perfectly in alignment. And this crew, who on paper certainly were not as strong, the Oxford crew had most of the world champions and the Olympic champions, absolutely thrashed them, because through measurement they were able to put the teammates in the optimal configuration and ensure that they were doing all the same thing at the same time, which kept the run on the boat, and they handily won for a number of years afterwards. So that was just highlighting an example, highlighting how measuring the smaller details really help improve performance of a team. Because then you're aware of your individual contribution, but also what the others are doing, how that impacts the whole team.
Yeah. So you mentioned these other teams, Oxford and Cambridge. Well, you yourself are an athlete as well. Bike racing, competitive bike racing, rowing as well. How did your background in sports help you drive those results to scale companies successfully?
So I think it's on a couple of different things. Becoming good at a sport, especially something like an endurance sport like cycling, it doesn't happen overnight. It can take years to develop the physiology, the muscles, the cardiovascular system, and then accumulate all of the tactical knowledge and strategic knowledge necessary to perform well in a race.
Mm-hmm.
And on a day-to-day basis, as you're training for that big event, maybe a year or two out, you have bad days and good days, like we all do at work. And keeping your mind, your eyes firmly set on the bigger goal allows you to get through some of those more difficult days, but also along the way, give yourself some smaller wins. And I think this is key for motivation of individuals and teams.
Mm-hmm.
So I always set myself much smaller goals throughout each season. And then the stepwise improvement provides the motivation and impetus to keep going towards the larger goal.
Right.
And so I use that in my approach at work as well. And I think having small achievements, celebrate the successes, and call out team mates' performances and team members' performances, and give them recognition. Everyone wants to know they are having a valuable input into the result. And I think being recognized in front of their peers is one of the most important things for people. I think that they can validate that they're doing a good job.
Yeah. Yeah, I spent most of my career in medical. I didn't cross over into sales like you have, but I've always observed a lot of the most inspirational, strongest, effective leaders in sales do that very well, and to recognize and provide those recognitions. And some of the most leading and innovative medical teams that scaled also do that on the medical side. And the motivational factor is so important. I would share with you my philosophy that organizations all have their aspirational goals and values, but unless you hold your teams accountable, they remain mere aspirations, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can never really expect anyone to work harder than you for your organization. You can really not know how their motivation changes from time to time, from year to year, or from day to day. But at the very least, you can probably expect everyone on your team to improve, to just strive to do a little bit better, like you just described in your biking example.
I found it essential, say, in bike racing, to be able to measure the fitness level at any given time. So one tracks mileage, one tracks speed, heart rate, power, and you can see how your training program influences your fitness level and your performance level. So you can make course adjustments. So if you didn't take those measurements, you'd be just going off feel. And while a lot of us have some great intuition, both from a management perspective and maybe from the sporting perspective, you're still not using actual data. So data does a couple of things. It allows you to know when you're on the right track, going in the right direction. It allows you to know when perhaps you're regressing. But also it gives transparency to all of the stakeholders and all of the team. And I think when team performance is of the utmost, it's essential that everyone who is in that team pulls their own weight to be able to see your individual impact relative to the rest of the team. It can at the same time be rewarding for that person to see, yes, I'm keeping up there, I'm actively contributing, but also perhaps for the team member who isn't contributing to the same level, they see it too. And for a sense of shared duty and not to be embarrassed, they actually pick up their performance as well, because it's visible to everyone. So you don't have to call them out. It's just, I want to contribute. I see now that I'm not at the level that my peers are. I need to step up my game. So I think that really helps with that transparency of what's our goals, how are we performing today, this week, this month, and then tracking those in real time relative to the team's performance as a whole.
So you've clearly been able to adapt, right? Have neuroplasticity. Not everyone always is successful at, probably, right? As a scientist, and what kinds of shifts in this mindset are necessary, do you believe, to transform into a successful commercial leader?
Gosh, I've seen that many people who are good at sales aren't necessarily good at management.
Mm-hmm.
Many people, scientists who are absolute rock stars in terms of publications they get, maybe don't get the principal investigator to run a lab. So I think certainly the skills for people management can be picked up along the way, but as with everything else in life, some personalities are going to be more suited to it than others. I've always been a little bit more outgoing than maybe many of the people in the lab, which perhaps helped me in terms of communication.
Mm-hmm.
Many scientists are so focused and dedicated and have a true passion for what they do. But it can also be sometimes they're not as effusive or not as great communicators. So I think working on those muscles, trying to understand the audience you're talking to and positioning the message or the information you're trying to convey at their level. So constantly trying to put yourself in other people's shoes, whether it's your teammates, whether it's your boss or the people that report to you or the clients. So I think having that self-awareness and empathy, but also being able to understand the perspective from the other side of the table.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, what about from a technical perspective then? How do you not only develop these drugs, but deliver them to patients and commercialize them and make sure that these breakthroughs reach your intended community, right? What are those technical kinds of shifts that you've learned and you would suggest?
Well, I've worked with some therapeutic companies and some diagnostic companies, but primarily the companies I've been involved in are technology platforms, analytical platforms, CapEx, robotics and equipment, plate readers, microscopes. All of these technologies are essential to move science forward. So from the technical perspective, you have to get it right. And it's absolutely key and essential is to go ask the end users how they are, what they need to do, what they need to accomplish. Is there a gap or a challenge in what they're trying to accomplish? Could the data be better? Could the costs be better? Do they need to improve throughput significantly in order to hit their goals? So I think it's absolutely essential is to understand the end user experience. Not build something or come up with a solution that you think personally is going to work. You have to go confirm it.
Now, how were you able to do that, having started out in cancer research, R&D, and then turning into a commercial leader responsible for large teams?
It's understanding, knowing either yourself or another subject matter expert understands that market and the technical nuance within whichever use case you're assessing. And to the point where you can identify the gotchas, the critical must-have performance parameters or performance specifications for the solution you have. That you only get by having some domain knowledge and then translating that back into what one will provide to the research community and the drug development community. You then have to go ask the question, can you provide it for cost that's less than you sell it for? The financials are so important. And I think that's one of the biggest take-homes I got very quickly into the commercial world is, if you can't make money at it, it is not going to fly, no matter how intellectually stimulating or exciting the science is or the solution you're coming out with. In order to get it into the hands of people who can benefit, you've got to make it financially viable. And to do that, you have to understand the economics as well and what is available in the market. What can you sell it for? What does it cost to build or provide that service? And then you've got to do the financial modeling up front before you go to market. So many companies, small, medium, and large, have launched, fantastic, innovative solutions, only to fall flat because they got one key critical parameter or must-have wrong. And it's not that the market wasn't there.
Yeah.
Just they didn't go confirm it in the market and made some critically incorrect assumptions. So having enough humility to say to yourself, I think I've got this right, but I'm going to go verify if I do, with enough people in industry that are representative of that market, so you can actually build a cogent financial model.
If you look back at your career, was there a bridge from the R&D to the commercial? Was there a time or where you actually gained some of these skills and this kind of?
Yes, I'd say that first experience moving into the technology vendor space. So
tech transfer.
Yes, it was a tech transfer role. It was a nice stepping stone from the lab into the commercial sales. I was the tech transfer scientist, getting workflows to work in clients' labs all across the country, and primarily in BioPharma labs. And it really became very apparent that the only thing that mattered to the client was getting their application to work and the quality of the data, and them hitting their goals that their supervisors had given them and their company was trying to focus on. So if you're just really, really focused on the solution, especially if it's complex science, complex technology, that really hit home there, that I look at things through the end user's eye, having been the customer myself, and try to understand where they're coming from first and what their problems are in solving that technical issue.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's what's amazing about how you've been able to collect all these various different experiences from all the different sides and angles of the business of science and drug development and R&D. Well, thank you very much, Graham, for having this conversation again with me and sharing it with our friends and audience of the All Out Coach Show. What are some final takeaways and lessons that you have for them to be able to navigate and even break through these tight turns that our healthcare ecosystem is forcing us to make, right? And be innovative.
Maintaining that excitement and intellectual curiosity for the amazing science and advancements that we're experiencing these days. I think it's sheer joy to be able to see some of these solutions make a real impact on everyday people's lives. I've seen things like 30 years ago I never thought would be possible, specifically in terms of like cancer development, but also early diagnosis and rare disease treatment now. So I think we're living in just a remarkable time where the pace of technology evolution and biomedical research and development is at such a pace where we're maintain that passion, maintain that joy, maintain that curiosity, and you can get through all of the other arduous day-to-day bureaucracies. But what's your purpose? It's solving big problems and bringing solutions to people's lives that can have a real impact. Great.
Well, wonderful. You can connect with Graham. We'll also see you, Graham, as our speaker and expert judge at the Medical Innovation Olympics in October 6th through the 21st. The opening ceremony is October 6th. I'll share more details about that. And it clearly shows your curiosity, your dedication to innovation. Thank you, Graham, once again. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. It's been a pleasure.